Welcome, everyone. I'm Hilary Monaco. I'm a member of the professional development team of the Postdoctoral Executive Committee, otherwise known as PEC. Today, we will be having a presentation from Jackson Howard at EURAXESS. As some of you know, EURAXESS is a platform for researchers, entrepreneurs, universities, and businesses to interact with each other. EURAXESS is a hub for mobility-related topics for researchers and entrepreneurs and allows universities and businesses to connect with talent, projects, and funding. Today, we have a regional coordinator for EURAXESS North America speaking with us, Jackson Howard. Jackson's role at EURAXESS is to inform researchers of all scientific backgrounds and nationalities based in North America about career opportunities that the European research area offers, including European, national, and regional funding opportunities. He holds a Master of Arts degree in International Relations from American University, and prior to joining EURAXESS, he worked in the diplomatic and nonprofit sectors. As Jackson talks with us today, please feel free to include any questions you have in the chat. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jackson. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Hilary, and thank you everyone for your interest. I'm really happy to connect with you today. And I want to thank the Professional Development Division of the Postdoctoral Executive Committee at the Mount Sinai School of Medicine for inviting me to give this overview today, as you know, of European funding and research opportunities. Just to sort of open with what I would normally say is the ending, like a quick overview, I'm going to try to explain the landscape very broadly today and leave you hopefully feeling confident that you can navigate the EURAXESS website and then just generally feel aware of what the different tools that the European Union offers are for finding funding and job opportunities in Europe. And then I can elaborate a lot more during the Q&A at the end. So as Hilary mentioned, feel free during the entire presentation to drop any questions in the chat. I will, once I've given the main presentation, hopefully go through, read some of those and be able to address them. I'll also very briefly touch on a couple questions submitted during the registration in advance. And then depending on the amount of interest, the number of questions, we'll try to wrap up within an hour or so. But if people have questions and sort of asking out loud is a better format, we can do the hand raising feature and then have people just sort of ask and elaborate. We can do a little bit of back and forth that way. But I'll open again just by emphasizing that a lot of this is a dialogue, not just in this event, but being in touch with us is about supporting you and your research needs. So regardless of your nationality, which side of the Atlantic you're on, as long as there's some European component to it, you might be a European in North America, you might be someone from any country in the world interested in Europe or European funding programs, that therefore involves me, and my job is to support you and give you information. And oftentimes the main end result will be connecting you to an expert based in Europe, depending on the field or your country of interest. So I'm confident that even if there's questions I can't answer, either today or in general through your email outreach to us, I will connect you to people that can. So I hope I've sort of set the tone that I want this to be open, and I'll try my best to give a good overview, but not spend too long, because there's going to be other events where you'll hear us present, and I can go more into the weeds on specific aspects, but I want this to be a general overview and feel like you have the opportunity to ask your questions. So I'll be monitoring the chat afterwards, and then we can open that up a bit more. So give me a moment here. I'm just gonna, actually right before I share my screen, I want to maybe get a sense of the audience. I didn't ask too many questions on the registration page. There's no right or wrong answer here, but I do want to launch a poll to just get a slight sense of sort of who you are in general as a group. So if you've registered for this event, obviously there's some interest. I want to know if you're considering, if you're attending because you really have a specific country in mind, or maybe a small number of countries in Europe, if you're interested in Europe generally, or if you're very happy to stay put. Again, most of our audience today is at Mount Sinai, so in New York or in the US in general, but you're just kind of curious what this is all about and what opportunities are out there. Or maybe none of these apply to you. Like I said, I'm not going to follow up based on who answered what question. I just kind of want to know, and maybe I can tailor a couple examples or a couple of remarks based on the demographics. And it looks like it's cutting quite evenly between the three main options. I'll just give a couple seconds. This isn't really going to be mandatory. Actually, everyone's answered, so let's go on. And everyone answered the second question as well. Do you hold a European passport? That really won't, if you do not, that won't present a downside to you. I really am happy to emphasize that, as you'll see in some slides I'm about to launch, that Europe's doors are open to researchers. If you're European, obviously the freedom of movement to be in any European country without a visa is quite convenient. But that said, there are sort of EURAXESS colleagues on the ground, and then also the universities themselves are well versed in everything they need to help people who are not from that country and need a visa or a student visa, academic visa, to get what they need and transition very quickly and get to work, so to say. So that's also, let's see, it looks about 40% do have European passport, 60% don't. So it's really interesting. I'm going to just make sure I can reference this also in the recording. Gonna make sure I have those numbers all saved. So in that poll, actually, let me share this. I'm sorry, I don't think you could see that. So hopefully in the audience, you can quickly take a look at the numbers here, the breakdown. A nice, basically even division between considering Europe in general, considering a couple specific countries, or not really looking to go to Europe in the short or long term, but just want to learn more. So that's really useful to me. I actually like that it's quite an even breakdown and not too much in one direction. So I'm going to stop sharing this. Thank you for bearing with me. Now I'm going to share my screen and dive right into the general aspect of my presentation. So I represent EURAXESS Researchers in Motion. That's the overarching project of the European Commission. To elaborate, there's a few different ways to break it down. You have EURAXESS Europe and EURAXESS Worldwide. The large number of representatives are within EURAXESS Europe. They're based in Europe. There's a small number of us working at what we call the hubs under EURAXESS Worldwide in different countries outside of Europe. So I have a colleague, Dr. Daria Butinir-Karajan, and she and I are based in Washington, DC, and we cover the US and Canada. So basically, regardless of which country you're from, if you live in the US or Canada, we would be your main points of contact, either giving you relevant information and answering your questions, or connecting you to national points of contact in Europe who can answer with a lot of expertise. So EURAXESS, when I talk about this generally, I'm talking about the overall initiative. It's called EURAXESS, sort of with the subtitle Researchers in Motion, to try to emphasize this dynamic or this aspect of researcher mobility and present this idea that Europe is all about brain circulation. So instead of this being about sort of one region trying to engage in brain drain, it's the idea that research really does well when we're not factoring in borders and when people have mobility, it can move in any direction. So a lot of the funding opportunities I'll present towards the end of my slideshow, you'll see that if you're based in Europe, there's a lot of funds to go elsewhere. But if you're based outside of Europe, there are funds to go to Europe. So it's really in both directions. And that's why we look at this emphasis as brain circulation. So this webinar today, I'm speaking on behalf of EURAXESS North America. Like I said, we're this 2-person team in Washington, DC, and I'll explain the specific services and activities that my colleague and I do, but this also represents all of the EURAXESS worldwide hubs in the different countries outside of Europe. So we are a unique, we call ourselves a pan-European initiative of the European Research Area. In short, this ERA, European Research Area, is a term for the EU member states, those 27 countries that make up the European Union, and the associated countries. This is a term you'll see in a lot of the funding opportunities. It refers to the countries that are not EU member states, but they pay into the budget for research and innovation. So for that specific aspect, they are considered, you can think of them like member states. So there's over 40 countries that do that at this point. For the most part, it's Europe as a whole. I know with the UK and the famous news over the last 6 years with Brexit, it still feels like it's happening slowly, even though it's mostly wrapped up. They have negotiated access to a lot of the European Union research and funding initiatives, research and innovation initiatives and funding. So with very few exceptions, they for the most part, they are an associated country and they have access as if just like they did before. So I know that's generally one of the first questions we get is what's the status of the UK within the EU. So for research and innovation, you can think of them with very few changes to how it was before. And the overall goal of this is to enable free circulation of researchers, scientific knowledge and technology, free circulation in both directions. And one of the ways we do this is through EURAXESS. It's again, this tool of the European Union, its member states and associated countries. So in talking about scientific collaboration and trying to enhance that, I'll emphasize that our mandate has two parts for EURAXESS Worldwide and us at EURAXESS North America. It's to promote Europe as a research destination. And in recent years, the Commission has tried to encourage us to emphasize a living destination. There are really, I think, the healthy work-life balance, very good benefits in addition to salary that I think make it very competitive. So people, when we're pitching it, I want people to not just think of it specifically career-wise, but also in terms of one's general living destination. I think it's a really attractive option. That said, different parts of the world are sometimes better fits for different people. So therefore, for those that have made the US or Canada their home, I think a lot of the folks in the audience today are in New York. So definitely I'm close by in DC. And that's great. If you are either European or connected to Europe, want to be connected to Europe, one of the other things we do with our mandate is to try to provide support services to the European scientific diasporas. We say scientific, sometimes we're generally referring to researchers in general. Oftentimes they tend to congregate around the STEM fields. So I'll sort of use the terms interchangeably, but basically the diaspora networks of these researchers representing their national countries. In some cases, it's really formal. The Spanish group they're a registered nonprofit in the US. They receive funding from the Spanish government. There's other examples of networks that are a lot smaller. They're run by volunteers that just are passionate about their country. They might have smaller memberships, but basically we try to provide whatever support we can, highlight their activities. Just this past Monday, we made a recording available of the Swedish Diaspora Network, and they held an event on Swedes and non-Swedes alike moving back to Sweden and how they can translate their work and research experience to the Swedish job market, because there's always going to be slight sort of cultural and job market differences in how resumes are reviewed, what the culture's like when it comes to interviewing. So this kind of thing, that if we co-host it with them, or even if we're just aware of it, but they're sort of under our umbrella of researcher diaspora networks, we try to shine a light on that and make it more accessible to everyone. So you don't have to be Swedish to have found relevance in this activity that I'm giving as an example. So I'd be really happy to, maybe in the end, I can share a link to that specific recording in the chat. But if you sort of passively follow us on social media, you subscribe to our emails, you'll see that we're constantly highlighting these types of activities. And oftentimes they're relevant for you, even if it's not about a specific country of interest to you. And as a quick reminder, all of our services are free. So when we talk about membership, we're simply saying, are you a subscriber to our emails? You'll never have to pay anything. Our events are open. We'll sometimes present at annual meetings where you have to pay to be an attendee, but anything that we're hosting ourselves, we make freely available. With the pandemic, that tends to be a lot of Zoom meetings, webinars like this. So if you represent a diaspora network, if you represent an additional university or institution, and you want us to give a tailored talk or a more general talk like this, I'm really happy to just send us an email, and I'll have all my contact information on one of the last slides. So I'm talking fast. I'm going to try to really leave a lot of room for questions. So I'm happy to reiterate anything. I will be making this presentation available. And then also people can send individual emails, and I'm really happy to elaborate on anything that I might not have spent too much time on. These 4 sections, soon to be 5 that I'm listing on this slide, basically just mirrors the top strip on the EURAXESS website. So you can, when you visit the EURAXESS website, our bread and butter is the jobs and funding database. People talk about the EURAXESS job portal, funding opportunities. All you have to do is go to the homepage and click that top left section, jobs and funding. This is where you as a researcher are invited to search for job opportunities, job vacancies, and funding opportunities. And institutions, universities, and companies all alike can publish their vacancies there. So this is a platform that's run by the European Commission. They actually have agreements where they pull from, I believe it's 7 private sector European job databases, but any university that's worth its salt in Europe knows about this, and they're publishing their own academic positions there. However, anything receiving funding from the European Union, by law, by mandate, it has to be up here. So you can rest assured, I would encourage anyone to use every platform they're aware of. LinkedIn, Indeed, all these tools are great. When you're pressed for time, you can think of this as a one-stop shop. It's really where you'll find a lot of opportunities. I sometimes refresh a couple of times throughout the day, and I see the number of opportunities going slightly up and down. And I give this example to reiterate that everything is live, updated, fresh, and it is centrally approved. So it cuts down on spam posts. It's really not one of those sort of Wild West platforms where people can post spam or fraudulent opportunities or harvest your data. Everything is approved centrally. So the things that are there, have been approved by our colleagues based in Europe. If you go to our second section, it's called the partnering tool and hosting. This is where you can register a free account and you can search for individuals or organizations and businesses. Oftentimes people will do this when they want to look for project partners. A lot of the funding ends up being for consortia. So you might want to join an existing consortium or found one, and you'll need other people, oftentimes based in Europe. So this is where you can do that. And you can add your CV in, it's called the EURAXESS format, basically a standard European format that, just like anytime you apply for a job, sometimes they make you upload your resume, but then you have to type everything in one more time. What's nice is any of these opportunities will accept your EURAXESS format, so you only have to do it the one time. I think it took me personally about 15 or 20 minutes to do. I got the formatting all right. I'm plugging everything in, really easy to understand fields. And then from there, whenever I needed to show it as an example, it's easy. It's a centralized profile you can update live. You're not having to do anything from scratch ever again. In terms of career development, especially with the pandemic and the fact that we've been able to bring in great speakers and publish this instantaneously to the world, we have career development sessions. We had a really good 5-part series on academic publishing last year. I'll also share a link to that, or you can find it in our past event archive. But basically, I want to impart in you this idea that we support you throughout your research career and the process. It doesn't have to be academia either. It can be industry. So there are career development centers in Europe. You can contact them virtually, but also if you end up moving to Europe or based there, they will be at your service. And then the local hubs like us are where you can find this useful information, archive training resources, and there's always more in the pipeline. There are right now 43 national portals. To go to this next section, information and assistance. These are the different websites that provide information on research jobs and funding opportunities on a country-by-country basis. So I mentioned those 27 EU member states and then all those additional associated countries that pay into the budget. That ends up being what makes it 43 national portals. Within these 43 countries, there's 600 support centers. Oftentimes, these will be offices within universities or other research institutions. But basically, you can think of them as region-specific experts, and then oftentimes they will have topic-specific funding. So if you're in health, if you're in medicine, you're interested in Northern Italy as an example, there would be specific support centers you can find on the portal that will be in that specific region, and you can whittle down national points of contact based on those fields that are of interest to you. And all of these 43 national portals will have information on 3 categories: moving to Europe, living in Europe, and then if you choose leaving Europe. For the most part, these 3 categories have a total of 18 different topics. These are, I'll show a screenshot in a little bit. These are things like visa matters if you don't hold a European passport, information on like stipends that family members get. So if you're bringing a spouse and or children with you, certain funding schemes do include resources for that. Things like banking, every country will have a different banking system, even though it's all within Europe. Different countries will have different laws and standards, and they will explain things like this to you. Your gateway to all of this is through us at EURAXESS Worldwide. I previously mentioned that my colleague and I represent North America. If you happen to be from or based in any of these other regions that you see below, they'll also be very, very happy to help you. But again, very little of what we do is nationality specific. So being based in New York, being based currently in the US or Canada, I am extremely happy and mandated to support you. So please don't be shy and reach out with your questions. So I mentioned these 4 or now 5 main sections. I just want to give a quick overview of the website. If you go to euraxess.org, that'll forward you to the long official European Union URL. But basically that horizontal strip I mentioned is right here in the screenshot. In recent years, I talked about a push to ensure that we also focus on Europe as a living destination. A lot of what we're talking about is science, is health, is medicine. That said, there's also been a push to make sure that we highlight that those aren't the exclusive fields where there's opportunities. There's also a lot in the social sciences and humanities. And in recent years, there's been a push to include entrepreneurs and businesses. So when I mentioned this job board, it is open, things are reviewed and approved, but it's not exclusively academic positions. So you can find private sector opportunities. I know that was a question that we received a few times during pre-registration. So I would encourage you to spend a little bit of time making that free profile. If you want to look for partners, just generally see what other folks who've registered, what their sort of demographics look like. But this is where you can also find that institutions have registered, including private sector organizations, and trying to make themselves visible so that you can find them. So if you have questions on how to use this, if you have trouble registering, any sort of issues, reach out to me afterwards. But it is a really, really good first step in addition to searching the job portal. For some current numbers, as of this morning, this is rounded up or down slightly, the number of researchers that have registered profiles for themselves. And every now and then, the data is sort of called and updated because I've seen the number drop at times. So I believe what's happening is that in the back end, if a profile's been inactive for quite a long period of time, it's sort of put in some sort of dormant mode or something like that. So when I say 29,300, I want to assure you these are the number of people that have in recent times logged in, used the platform, used the service. And one way you can stand out slightly by being about sort of in the 1/6 of the people that have taken this step, you can add your resume, your CV. So I mentioned this EuroPass format. You can just search on your favorite search engine, one word, EuroPass, and that will make it a lot easier for these institutions or other partners also to find you because your data is in a standardized format. And I mentioned that organizations, companies can also register as institutions. In this case, there's over 20,000. You'll find that the medical sciences tend to be one of the top fields in terms of the number of opportunities. I mentioned there's about 600 centers throughout Europe, and the job board, it's our bread and butter. There's about 13,000 job positions. I should make a quick comment right now on the terminology. There are positions and there are offers, and an offer may sometimes have multiple positions. So if you go right now and it'll say approximately 13,300 positions, and then you search the job portal, it'll say about a little over 10,000 offers. there's no bug, there's no sort of, the math isn't wonky. It's that those 10,000 offers, oftentimes some of them will include multiple positions. Sometimes you'll see something that says 10 postdocs are being hired, and that'll of course affect the numbers. So those numbers are accurate and updated on the fly. And there are, like I said, daily listings on research jobs, fellowships, and funding offers. So I gave the example of refreshing several times a day and seeing it change. You can do it too. It's that first section, jobs and funding. And when you can enter any keywords, but then also you can see in this example screenshot where people can turn on and off different toggles. So I think it was a little over a third of you that said you are interested in Europe and you have specific country or countries in mind. So instead of Europe as a whole, if you know you want to go to Spain or Portugal and you're not really interested in anywhere else, you can simply toggle those 2 countries on, for example, and then those 13,000 opportunities will whittle down to a much more manageable number. You'll type in medicine or whatever specific field you're in, and all of a sudden that'll be something where you can have a smaller number, smaller amount of results, and then also take action and follow up, apply to them. What I like about EURAXESS also as a service is that you're never applying through us. We don't have a single dollar, single euro that we're granting to anybody. We're not making any thumbs up or thumbs down decisions to approve something. We're simply the information board, sort of the promoters connecting you ultimately to the other end of the opportunity. So when you search on the job board, a few clicks in, you're getting the direct contact information. Oftentimes it's phone and email, but also the website of the institution and the specific job posting. So you don't have to worry that your data is sort of with a middleman or that certain information is being tracked. At the end of the day, you're getting to the source, and we're just the springboard for you to find it. So maybe I'll go through quickly here to get to the questions a bit sooner, but I mentioned career development. This includes industry, not only academia. We've had a couple how-tos in the past, not just at EURAXESS North America, but with some of our other hubs. Most of the activity, sometimes in the local languages, but a lot of the work our hubs do in the other EURAXESS worldwide regions are in English as well. So you could just as easily search for the website, the YouTube channel, the social media pages for EURAXESS Latin America and the Caribbean, Korea, Japan, and they'll have really good in English recordings of their career development seminars and workshops. So I mentioned registering. Again, I leave this for you sort of for reference. I'll make the slideshow available later. That's why I don't want to cut out this slide. But I think I've really spoken to this. I would encourage you to take a little bit of time, register, and then add your curriculum vitae in that EuroPass format. And this personalized assistance, I mentioned before, the 42 or 43 national portals. I want to quickly give an example of these countries. So this represents right now the 27 EU member states and all those countries that pay into the budget for research and innovation. It's 43 because Tunisia has just joined as an associated country. I think either it has not been updated with the national portal website yet, but even in the periphery of Europe, and then I think in the perhaps near future, perhaps a few years out, other countries, even outside of the immediate neighborhood, are really interested at the bilateral level, at the sort of country to country level in research and innovation. They also see value in this brain circulation. So to that point, Canada has recently finished exploratory talks with the European Commission on joining. They would be paying into the budget. They would have a bilateral negotiation. It would have to be passed by the parliaments of both countries. But then if and when this happens, that would mean Canada would be treated just like the EU member states when it comes to funding and access for researchers in Europe. That said, I will be in a few slides right now giving examples where your nationality or where you are based currently with your institution absolutely do not matter. A lot of the funding is bottom up. So if you're currently based in the US, all these opportunities that can help take you to Europe. I mentioned before, I want to quickly go back to generally most of the national portals have them in 18 categories. It is different on a case-by-case basis, but you might ask, what is the social security and the medical care situation like in country X in Europe? And that's where the national portal will have guides for you that are already pre-made, but then also individual points of contact that will answer your specific questions. I gave banking as an example earlier. You can see here, I hope it's not too small, but you'll be able to also read the slideshow afterwards when I put it online. Quickly moving forward, like I said, we count membership simply as, do you subscribe to our email newsletter? We call them flash notes. They're email blasts that we send out twice a month. So it's quite easily to sort of open it, passively scroll through. We'll usually have about 12 different an assortment of funding opportunities. Some will be extremely specific and not of interest to you, but the day that you get one that really is sort of in your wheelhouse, you'll be able to click the link and follow up right away. Other times there'll be upcoming events, recordings of past events, and then news that's of interest to researchers in general, and European Union news in a general sense as well. So I would encourage you, if you didn't already click yes on the registration form for this webinar, you can click the button here. I'll have a QR code at the end of the presentation as well. Just put your name and email. A lot of the other fields are optional, and you'll start getting those emails from us. I'll also in the chat in a little bit send URLs to all of our social media profiles. That can be a really good place to, again, sort of passively just see us pop up in your feed with a few interesting tidbits of news or highlighting other things that, for example, the European Researcher Diaspora Networks have done. So to briefly summarize, before I get to some of the specific funding examples, what we do and how is through events like this. We have, as part of our mandate, to support those on the ground in North America, the initiative of the European Scientific Diasporas in North America. Basically, I gave the example of the Swedish network that on Monday held a really interesting webinar on people moving back or just moving to Sweden and translating for the job market there. Events like this, whenever we're aware of it, we're always happy to speak on a panel or simply highlight and promote the event. We also have quarterly newsletters where we feature a European country's research landscape, sort of like a country in focus, but explaining it to an outsider's perspective, what it's like to research in that country. In terms of the how do we share? We do information on European funding opportunities. Those are through those flash notes, website and social media. I'm really excited in a few slides to give an overview on the sort of the most famous grants and fellowships. And then I mentioned the national portal. I should add that I said by requirement, anything that receives EU funding, which is sort of that pan-European governmental funding has to show up on this portal. But then the countries themselves also sometimes, well, not just sometimes, these countries have national funding for research and innovation, but that's completely autonomous, independent. It's their sovereign right to do that. That has nothing to do with the EU, but knowing that the EURAXESS Job Board is the platform for sharing this, they'll proactively go in and share this, even though it's not automatic. So this is where we find countries themselves and universities posting their scholarships, their funding opportunities, et cetera. So you'll see sort of random sampling of this every 2 to 2.5 weeks through our flash note emails. And then how do we do research career development? It's through these hands-on sessions. Sometimes we'll have webinars on grant or fellowship writing. I mentioned the 5-part series on academic publishing last year. With the meeting format, which this is, as opposed to the webinar format, it allows us towards the end of a lot of these presentations to engage in more of a dialogue, more of a back and forth. So this is where when we have really good speakers, either from academia or from industry, I feel that the researchers end up making good connections and sort of having this interactive dynamic where they can also feel that they're moving forward with connections they've made. So I've mentioned Horizon Europe. It's the 7-year framework program for research and innovation. Basically, the way the European Union does it is they fund research and innovation on a 7-year basis. So it's all, the budget is all earmarked in advance. When COVID hit in early 2020, for those of us here in North America, we were on the final year of the previous 7-year framework program. So we did not have any interruptions in funding. That was all earmarked 6 years earlier and sort of secured. And they actually negotiated for Horizon Europe, the new one that just started in the beginning of 2021, 95.5 billion euro for research and innovation. And that's the highest that it's ever been historically. So that's really exciting. It's increased funding for all the different programs. This is a graphic that's sort of from the European Commission that gives a high level overview. What I want to spend some time talking about is the European Research Council and the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions. Those are grants and fellowships respectively, that are bottom up, where you simply say which research field you're applying in, because they have panels that are panelists who are experts in those fields, and they're the evaluators. They need to make sure they pair you up with the right evaluators, but your proposal is completely bottom up. So you're not fitting into some predetermined category. You're not completing someone else's, some other institution's goals. And the funding is really good. It's 16 billion for the European Research Council grants, and 6.6 billion for the MSca fellowships. And these both include the two dynamics, people from outside of Europe, regardless of nationality, going to Europe, and again, regardless of nationality, being based in Europe currently, going elsewhere. So I'll explain those in just a bit. I want to quickly go to Pillar 2. There's some priority clusters for different funding opportunities. In the health field, that's where there's an exception. US-based applicants are eligible for funding. For the most part, for a lot of these Pillar 2, you have to be based in an EU member state or associated country or affiliated with one of those institutions. with US leadership in health and a lot of the great professional background that researchers in that field have, you are eligible in that one field. It's a really nice exception. I'm really happy to present to MSSM today because normally I'm explaining why that is maybe a barrier to entry for some people, but I would encourage you to, it's called the Cordis website. I have a lot of links I'm going to share after the Q&A. One of the things I'll be sharing is a link to Cordis. It can be overwhelming at first, but basically it is the, in addition to the EURAXESS job portal, it's where you can find all the European Horizon Europe funding opportunities. You can either find anything in health when you filter that, toggle that on or off through the filter, or if you want to find all the opportunities eligible to you as someone based in the United States, you can simply type United States of America, and that searches that in the description text of countries that are eligible, because not every country is automatically eligible. This is where a lot of the specific nitty-gritty, the national points of contact within Europe will be able to answer some questions. I still hope to review the chat towards the end of my presentation and give you some examples, but regardless, we're going to get answers to your questions. So I do want to spend a moment speaking further to the ERC grants and the MSca fellowships. So these are bottom up. The sole criterion for evaluation of the European Research Council grants are excellence. We normally will hold a webinar or a series of webinars on a yearly basis, giving sort of tips and tricks from a previously funded grantee. I believe it was the end of 2020. We had a really great American grantee who ended up doing an ERC grant in Italy, who sort of was giving tips and tricks for the proposal process. The application process does change slightly on a year-to-year basis. So if you're ever looking at an old guidebook, an old recording of a webinar that's not from the current year, just try to also take a look at the novelties of that year's application process, because there might be slightly different ways you should go about things. But in general, the sort of principles of how to highlight your strengths and explain your proposal, those for the most part stay true year to year. So like I said, it's 16 billion euro for those European Research Council grants. The criteria for MSca fellowships are excellence, impact, and quality and efficiency of the implementation. Towards the end of June, if you want to mark your calendars, it's tentatively June 22nd. We will have a webinar explaining the MSca fellowships, which specific one is appropriate for you. I will actually, in maybe 2 slides, get to that. I'll quickly jump back to the ERC grants. So you, based on your number of years experience post-PhD, will more or less fall into a specific grant scheme here. So for the ERC, a lot of folks, the first one that they would go to is the starting grant. I have written out all of the specifics. I'd rather send you links to the website afterward. It's a lot easier to digest. But for example, you have to be between 2 and 7 years post-PhD for starting grants. The national contact points can give you really specific information. If you are 3 years post-PhD, but there's usually all these really interesting questions people have where certain things might or might not count as work experience, for example. I don't want to get too much into the weeds in that right now, but for the most part, when you read the descriptions, you'll know which category you fall under and you'll have a good idea if you want to apply or not. We also have call calendars. So for example, what they call the 2022 calendar has already closed, but for the 2023 call dates, these are tentative, but you'll see the earlier ones start opening up as soon as the summer. So in less than 2 months, the starting grant and the synergy grants will open up in mid-July. So this is something where if you're interested, you'll have until late October, early November to apply to those respectively. But what you can do is you can read our guides, follow webinars from last year, for example, and get some really good insights from previous evaluators who explain what their thought process is and how they evaluate proposals, and from current or previous grantees who explain their thought process as well. There's nothing restricting them from sharing their proposals themselves. So there's it's their prerogative. They don't have to do that. But sometimes you might find that if you reach out to a current or previous grantee, they're sometimes happy to share their proposals so that you can sort of see the way they've worded things and get an idea on how you can word yours. So moving on to those MSca fellowships, they were previously called Marie Curie fellowships. If you ever hear someone just say Marie Curie actions, it's the exact same thing as the full term now, Marie Sklodowska-Curie actions. Again, based on the number of years post-PhD, you'll follow into a certain category here. There are 2 aspects: the European postdoctoral fellowship. For postdoctoral fellowships, the most famous one, there's 2 aspects: European and global. So if you want to go to Europe, again, EU member state or Horizon Europe associated country, for the most part, that means basically all of Europe. You can go to a European host institute for 1 or 2 years. The fact that you have the funding from the European Commission, from the MSca fellowship, means it's very prestigious for any European host institute to have you. So what you can do is On the EURAXESS jobs portal, you can also find the host search tool. This is where institutions are expressing their interest in hosting you because you're basically coming to them for free. Your salary is paid by the EU. So for them, it really just helps their overall profile and prestige. And you can apply regardless of your nationality. If you're based in Europe, then you would be interested in the global postdoctoral fellowships. This is where it can last between 2 to 3 years, where you can spend 1 to 2 years in what we call third countries, basically outside of Europe. And then you have a mandatory return phase of 1 year in a European EU member state or associated country. There's a lot of details that I can get into for this, but that's the short high-level overview. If I continue, I'll briefly speak to the sort of political aspect. So US researchers you have to bring your own funding to a project when it comes to collaborative research products. I mentioned earlier the exception of health, which is why I think presenting to the majority of you today at the Mount Sinai School of Medicine is really interesting because you'll automatically be eligible in that field. However, US entities might be eligible for funding when it's mentioned as something relevant in the call for proposal. So that's why I mentioned if you're looking for something not in the field of health, type in United States of America and your entity, your institution might be eligible for funding. The reason the US wouldn't be automatically eligible is to this US's status as a third country, meaning they haven't paid into the research and innovation budget and they're obviously not an EU member state, but it's sort of a way to increase brain circulation and equity. Low and middle income countries are automatically eligible for funding. So you may hear of a colleague from, let's say Panama, or institution in Panama that is automatically eligible for funding, and you know that it's not an EU member state or associated country. The categorization between low, middle, and high income countries are where that line gets drawn. That's a really brief overview. I'm happy to go more into details one-on-one, but third country entities can join European partners. That's where I mentioned using the consortia, the search tool, make a profile, and then search for other consortia. So hopefully this leaves a little bit of time for questions. My colleague and I are at your service. This is an email address that comes to both of us. I will usually be the first one to see it and respond, but we're both always kept in the loop. I will send an automated follow reply to everyone, so you can reply to it. You'll be reaching both of us. I'll also, if I can, maybe Hillary or her colleagues can read some questions and that have accumulated in the chat. And as I'm doing that, I'll quickly get some URLs that I've been mentioning that I'll copy and paste in the chat for everyone else. So I'll just reiterate before I transition to the Q&A, the usefulness of our mailing list. So I think most of you actually did say yes on the registration page. If you haven't, you have your phone in front of you, you're welcome to just take a quick picture of this. You'll get to the email sign up page. But other than that, you will in maybe 2 weeks or so be getting our first flash note from us. You'll see a few of these opportunities. So thank you so much for your interest. Actually, maybe what I can do is quickly go over some of the questions submitted during registration, and then from there take some of the live questions. So I'll open, these were some questions I got beforehand. I'll quickly just read them. My answer will actually basically be the same for all of them in terms of first points. So if you are in a specific field, in this question, in this asker's case, neuroscience, what are the non-academic job prospects for a candidate in neuroscience? If you're an MD, but you don't want to be a physician, what advice is there? And then if you want to learn about opportunities specific to psychologists or just specific to your field, what are those next steps? I will say almost so many of the questions in the Q&A in my line of work will be that it depends, partly because there's so many different countries. So I would say what you can do is nothing new from my earlier presentation. Creating a profile on that EURAXESS portal is where you can find people, make connections, network directly or indirectly, but then following us, we host networking events. So for example, this upcoming Wednesday, May 25th, in less than a week from now, we're hosting a quarterly networking session of European scientific diaspora members and network leaders. So if you are interested in a particular European country, or you are from a European country and you want to be a part of that diaspora network, where sometimes it's social, sometimes it's cultural, oftentimes it's very logistical, where people will help each other with visa matters. Even if you're Spanish versus French, you still have the same visa questions to get a visa to come to the US as a researcher, for example, but sometimes they share a lot of expertise either in their own language or just based on their common experiences. So we're hosting a networking event with them. This is the kind of thing where if you have any interest in connecting with them, you simply show up to these networking meetings, and they're somewhat structured, but we also make them open where people can just chat and get to know each other. And this is where I would highlight again those national portals. So I mentioned it's 43 national portals where the national points of contact associated with them will have expertise on a country. So if you, I think a lot of these questions would be country specific. So if you are an MD, but you don't want to become a physician, I would say, I don't know how every single country treats like the validation of your MD credentials, presumably that you earned in the United States. That really will differ. In some cases, in some countries, it may be simply taking an equivalency test. In other countries, it may be really strict. You may need to have some sort of language requirement. And that goes a bit beyond my initial level of knowledge. I would refer you to a national point of contact or EURAXESS staff member in that country or a small number of countries that you're considering. If you have these specific questions and you don't know where to start in terms of finding these people who can help you, send the same question to me directly by email at northamerica@euraxess.net, and I will forward it and basically make sure that I'm CC'd as well during the back and forth so that I can help keep the conversation on track and make sure that you're getting that answer you need. But basically, those EURAXESS national portals are a huge source of knowledge because they have that country-specific European expertise. So in terms of those pre-registration questions, I'm very thankful to have those there. I think what I'll do maybe is take a moment to see if I can scan some of the questions from earlier, or to my hosts, if there's any questions that have come that you've already queued up, I'm happy to hear them from you. So let's see here.
So we do have one question in the chat. This says, I'm curious about the position of Switzerland. I heard that they are not eligible for Horizon Europe grants. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so this is a great question. I wish there were a short answer. Right now, there's not a political agreement. I think Switzerland is not new to the concept of negotiating on a case-by-case basis their participation in a lot of different opportunities. They were previously fully associated with Horizon 2020. That's the previous 7-year program that ended at the end of the year 2020. And then we obviously are in the second year now of Horizon Europe. At this point, there are some disagreements regarding certain fields that they can or can't have access to. At a certain point, it becomes very political and beyond my scope. Some of it has to do with satellite or space technology, and a non-European Union member state has to agree to keep certain information confidential. It really, basically the short version of the answer is that they are not associated. I think both sides want association to happen, but they have not yet made the agreement. If an agreement doesn't happen by a certain date, people can currently apply for Switzerland as their European destination if they get certain grants or fellowships. However, if an agreement doesn't happen by whatever your respective start date would be, you will have the sort of compromise from the European Union has been that you will be able to keep your funding if you find another institute outside of Switzerland. So I know for people dead set on Switzerland, that might be a bitter pill to swallow for the time being. I hope that both parties come to a bilateral agreement. And I don't have information on what some of those dates might be, but oftentimes this is sort of an ongoing negotiation. So the short version is it's not yet associated. The national portal still exists because it existed under Horizon 2020. So you still do have national points of contact for a lot of these different funding schemes and the national portal. So I would say if you're highly interested in Switzerland specifically, a lot of questions sort of about the last minute updates can be directed to EURAXESS Switzerland. And people can definitely follow along the chat, continue to ask questions. I think at this point, if anyone wants to use the hand raising feature, that's also great. I'll be happy to hear from you. But to reiterate Hillary's comments in the chat, a recording will be made available. I'll also share the presentation in PDF format. And then again, our inbox is open to you for any specific questions. I think maybe I have a few, if people are shy or if I doubt I hit everything. So I encourage some questions, and if I can't answer it, yeah, let's.
Well, here's one. So we got a question that said that I think most of the job vacancies on the job portal were related to academia, but you did mention that EURAXESS partners with companies and other non-academic groups. So could you talk a little bit about what the distribution of that looks like right now? Like what proportion is academic, what proportion is more in the industrial side? Like, could you speak a little towards that?
Yeah, I think I had a slide earlier with the numbers. I want to say it was roughly 10,000 organizations. I might be off and I can double check. What I can't tell you is off the top of my head, or it would take a bit of digging to find how active different organizations are. If an organization posts a couple opportunities and then is slow to post updates or something, that I really wouldn't have a way of knowing. And for the most part, this is proactive on their part. proactive on the part of the private sector, and oftentimes they're not necessarily going to be aware of the portal. It's really in academia or any institution where European Union funding comes into play that they're already aware of us, or it's automatically posted to the portal. So I would say that's why in recent years there's been the push to encourage EURAXESS members or anyone just using the portal to be aware of the fact that there are opportunities there. And that's why also we encourage the first step to sometimes come from you as the researcher, create that profile so that if even afterwards down the road, an institution registers them, a private sector company registers themselves with an institutional profile, they can see your previously existing profile. That's sort of the roundabout way of explaining that you can still register yourself now, and even down the road, you'll be able to be found by the private sector. But that's where I think I've sort of alluded a few times to passively attending our events or just seeing what we're doing, even if you don't have the time to be fully engaged and scour our website on a frequent basis. If you spend a minute scanning our twice monthly emails, you might see like the occasional webinar that's of interest to you. Oftentimes, whether it's us or Europe-based colleagues or recordings from other EURAXESS worldwide hubs, you'll find that we convene panels where we'll have private sector folks speaking. Either sometimes it'll be hiring opportunities, not so often, but they might be giving tips and tricks on landing a job in the private sector or outside of academia. We've had in the past, I know, events on transitioning out of academia. This is where the insights can be quite useful because people will give their lived experience. I know, for example, I connected with one of your colleagues about a year ago at this point on a webinar that was hosted by a different group called INET NYC, International Network of Scientists in New York City. And they hosted a two-part panel, one where I presented EURAXESS services, and the other one was for people who had returned to Europe. So I presume most of them were Europeans, maybe there were some non-Europeans, but people who were previously based in Europe came to the New York area, got whatever degree they got, had whatever work experience they had, and then they wanted to go back. And it was about transitioning. And about half there were breakout rooms where people were networking, asking questions. And it was academia, non-traditional, non-bench career path, because it was specifically for scientists, and private sector. And so this is the kind of thing where even if it's not directly an event we're putting together, we're aware of these types of things. So we're highlighting and shining a light on these opportunities all the time. So you can sort of glean these from just being involved with us and hearing what we're doing. If I see a question in the chat. Someone's asking if EURAXESS helps with the living transition from the US to the EU, like with visas, or if that's left to the institute or member country. So that's where our partners on the EURAXESS Europe side will provide a lot of the knowledge and help. Oftentimes, things like the visa paperwork itself will come from your host institute when you have that all arranged, but all of the information about sort of checklists on what you need, and if something's just not, if you're sort of stuck in the process, to use a random example, like EURAXESS Latvia, if you're moving to Latvia, they would be the ones to say, we know that is a non-European researcher, this is the document you need, and here's where you can get it. Maybe they have boilerplate text to help you along the way. But basically the whole philosophy, the whole reason the European Union funds EURAXESS overall is to attract talent, regardless of background or nationality, but to attract talent to within Europe's borders, and then have European talent also go elsewhere that hopefully continues to circulate and benefit the European research area as a whole. And with science being a large part of, or STEM fields being a large part of this, that tends to be one of the more sort of borderless fields, I would say. So EURAXESS North America won't really help so much, but any of your queries that come to me, I will connect you to the right people. I can oftentimes, if you're interested in a certain country, for example, I mean, I've given a lot of, let's run with the Swedish example again. If you're going to Sweden, and I know that the Swedish Diaspora Network is holding these types of events on transitioning back to Sweden, EURAXESS Sweden will be able to help you, but also the Diaspora Network here in the US might be able to give you insights on people to talk to, common problems that are run into. And that would be more at I would say, semi-professional level. A lot of these groups are volunteer-based, but a lot of the times the knowledge networks end up being just like that. It's sort of word of mouth and through networks that you build and join. So the short answer is no, but I think it's really optimistic. You will get the help from the European side of EURAXESS, and you can funnel all these questions through me. So I'd leave it with that.
Can I just add on to that a little bit? Can you talk a little bit about what kinds of language requirements there might be when you're moving between countries, and like what the different expectations may be depending on where you're looking to move to or from?
Yeah, so like I opened before, a lot of the questions will be, it depends. There's no single answer. In a general sense, my most sort of bulletproof answer here is that English in general in the world, but certainly in Europe, just like in the US, is the language of higher education. So with no or few exceptions to my knowledge, doing a PhD, postdoc, or anything else in that line, you can do it in English. There will certainly be opportunities in many countries available in that host country's language. But speaking only English, every time I've sort of fielded this question to EURAXESS Europe counterparts or spoken to researchers, I found that it's completely possible, it's completely doable. Certain countries may have certain requirements or recommendations or provide you resources that are at your disposal if you choose to learn the local language. I think there's social and cultural reasons why it's great to learn the language of the country you're in. But in terms of your research career specifically, just isolating that, for the most part, you can do that in English. It really will be a country by country basis. So in the same spirit as the other question, you can reach out to me if you have that country in mind and maybe your field in mind, because sometimes it might depend on the university or the field, and I can help find that answer to you. But in general, just with English, you're great.
Okay, awesome. I think I have one other question from previous question lists. Can European citizens currently working in the US go to work in any European country? Or are there any countries that have specific requirements, even for Europeans, besides the UK, along those lines?
So this will, the sort of freedom of movement and the right to work, that will go way beyond EURAXESS. Is an EU citizen, you have the right, freedom of movement and the right to live in any EU country. So in that case, you don't even need to be a researcher with your job offer in hand or your host institute already lined up. You can enjoy that. If you are not European, of course, through the EURAXESS Europe office, the national portal, and your host institute, you will get all of those visas facilitated. But as a European, is an EU citizen going to another EU country, you have no restrictions. So if there's this applies sometimes to a small number of the audience. If you have some sort of European background where I know certain countries, if you have one grandparent from that country, sometimes it's a lot of paperwork, it can be a bit bureaucratic, there can be long waiting times. But I mean, from a purely career development point of view, if you are entitled to a European passport, I would encourage you to follow that, just to open doors further, so that you wouldn't need, especially for private sector jobs, that might be where it gets a bit harder, because just like the reverse example in the US, anytime you're getting a private sector visa, for the most part, my understanding is that the company needs to say, in the US example, oh, we couldn't find an American that could do the job. Therefore, this is why we need, please, the United States government, this is why we need you to issue this visa for this person to do the job. And I presume it goes the same way on the other end. So if you're somehow entitled to a European passport, I think it can open some doors for you, even if you currently have a US or any other passport. That's a little bit of a tangent, but if you have questions about that, I mean, anything that I can do to help connect people to Europe. I'll emphasize, based on that earlier polling question, I said there's no right or wrong answers. If you're an American or non-European in New York, in the US, and you want to stay put, that's also great. I want to do whatever I can to help connect you to some of these diaspora networks. If you have a country you're interested in, even if you are not interested in funding, but you do some sort of research where there's an international angle, and you want to find partners virtually, my job is to help connect you. So please use me as a free resource, and I'll help make those connections. We're also always open to feedback. So if you want to see a certain type of event, especially webinar, I mean, it doesn't cost me anything to travel. If you tell me what you want, and I can put it together. So whether it's to Mount Sinai as an institution for some sort of follow-up, or to any of you in the audience, I do want to do what I can to help promote both sides of research on the Atlantic. So this is an open invitation. I see a question from the audience.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
With your permission, I'll just continue to sort of run through some of these. Somebody asks if there are opportunities for non-scientist careers, such as consulting, intellectual property. This is where this will feel like a cop-out, because I'm going to give you the short answer. But if you go to the job portal and you type in literally these words in the keyword field, all of a sudden these 13,000 opportunities that I shared in that screenshot, that'll get whittled down a bit. If you want, what I can do to the person asking this, because I think you have your webcam on, it feels a little more interactive. I can sort of see the audience this way. What we can have a quick email exchange, and then even on a Zoom session or something, we can spend 10 minutes where I can sort of put myself in your shoes and then go on the portal, navigate, and then we can see what options come up. and I can sort of suggest out loud like what next steps could be in terms of contacting an institution or creating that profile on the website. So, oh, I'm so sorry. So I apologize. I had the settings so people couldn't unmute themselves. So I think, let me try to do this. If our hosts have to go, because I think I've sort of advertised this as a 1-hour event, I completely understand. I'm happy to hang around for another 10 minutes or so, and I'm going to allow anyone in the audience to unmute themselves. People are also welcome to go at this point. If I've answered your questions, no need to stick around. But for those that want to stay for another 5 or 10 minutes, I'm going to allow everyone to unmute themselves, and we can make it more of a dialogue. And maybe what I'll say is, I'll give a quick closing remark, and I'll record the whole thing, but I'll cut off the recording, so these final 5 or 10 minutes are a bit more off the record. So I'll say thank you very much. If our hosts have any closing words, I'm very happy to hear from them. But at this point, yeah, Hillary, I'd love to have you close us out, and then we can have a few stragglers, informal conversation for a few minutes.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I think this has been a great presentation and very informative. I know I've learned a lot. And I think I'm really happy to let the conversation continue. I think there's about to be a fire drill on my floor, so I'm going to have to pass to continue, pass on the torch. But we did change the settings so that now everyone should be able to unmute yourselves if you want to ask your questions with audio. And otherwise, thank you so much and have a great day, everybody.